Welcome everyone. Let's continue with the MFSQL Connector series on practical examples. This particular practical example will focus on inserting new objects into M files from SQL. Let me start off by opening our example scripts. Let me illustrate that by doing a select statement from customer, and we can see that we have all of the records for customer already from M files into SQL, and it has created all of the different fields that we have. So when we start to think about inserting records, a very important part is to think through the different types, data types, and the different data that will be required into M files that we want to push through from SQL. A very good way to get your mind around all of the properties that need to be addressed is by using the table that you're going to insert into, and I'm just going to create a new script to insert a new record, and we put it in. If I do that, I can see all of the properties that will be required in my table that need to be addressed in one or other way. However, a large part of these properties will not be addressed when I start to insert a record for a variety of different reasons. And I'm going to go back to my script to illustrate that. So what I've done here, I copied that, put it in here, and I started to update it. And in this sample, I've indicated which are the properties from SQL that either does not have a property in M files or is automated in the process, and we therefore, when we insert a record, we just don't have to address those. For instance, the GUID that is automatically inserted. The MX user ID is optional. It has special use. We'll get back to that at the later stage when we get to advanced integration. The class ID, it is being treated separately. Now, when I get to this level, I want to highlight that, for instance, you'll see that when there is a lookup, like for instance, a class or a last modified by, you'll find that it's not only the ID that is in the table, but also the label, which makes it easier. So if I look at here at the bottom, you'll see that we list both the class as well as the class ID as a separate column in SQL. Again here, country and country ID. However, when I start to insert a record, I don't have to deal with both. Here you can see that when I want to insert a country, I only have to insert the country ID. I don't have to address the country label because that is automatically filled in the integration process. When I talk about class, in fact, I don't even have to specify the class ID. Although it is intrinsically on the table, the system will automatically assumes the table that I'm working, take the class from that, and put the class ID in. When I get to created and created by columns, I don't have to insert those data into the table because effectively it's all automatically. Yes, I need to put in a customer name. And again, last modified by, and the ID for the last modified by, none of that have to go in. The name or title is quite interestingly because you will always see name or title on the class table. However, when you have an automatic naming convention, like in the case, there's an automatic naming convention on customer name, I don't have to put in the name or title. It would automatically put it in. However, if there weren't any automatic naming and my name or title is in fact by default my name of the object, then you obviously need to put that in.
Single file will automatically indicate, single file indicates whether this is a multi-file object or a single file object. The state and state ID, as well as the workflow and workflow ID, again, because state and workflow are labels, you don't need to address that at all. But in terms of the IDs, that's optional. You could put it in, or you don't have to put it in if it's not required on that particular object. State province in this case is a text, and telephone is a text. The website is a text, so I want to actually insert those records. Postal codes, I want to insert that record. Obviously, these are all optional. And then there are a few system-related properties that I want to address. First of all, the last modified date here, different from the MF last modified date. This last modified date is the date that this table in SQL have been last updated for this record, and this is all automatic, so you don't need to address that. Process ID is a very key column because you always need to set that to a 1 when you insert a new record. Otherwise, the system won't know which record has been inserted in the table. And because object ID, you don't have to basically insert it because it will be assigned when the object is being created. External ID, you could, it's optional. If you have an external ID, like for instance a third-party system ID that you want to put in as the display ID, you can do that. If you don't specify anything, it will assume to be the object ID. The mfiles version will come back from mfiles. Deleted is updated by the system automatically when the record is deleted in mfiles. And update ID is automatically inserted. That is the ID of the that updated the record in SQL, and that relates to the logging process that is taking place. So you'll notice that even with a very long list of properties and columns on the object, there are only very few that I need to address. And because one of them is a ID, I've chosen in this particular case not to show that just as a number, but to show that as a parameter, so that, and I just want to go up in my structure to show you how I have compiled that. There are various ways that you can get the ID or the MFID for a value list item, and what I'm going to show you in this particular case is what is the raw method, just to do a inner join on the value list items and value list tables so that you can get the particular ID that you're looking for. So in this case, I could just do this select statement, and that will show me the record, and I can see that United Kingdom, if this is the object that I want to basically insert in my record, the MFID is 3. I always recommend that one use parameters and a declaration to identify it, and in that way you have more flexibility and you don't have to go and look at the ID and then type it into your insert statement. So in this particular case, I took the statement above and I've just added a declaration on it, and I'm now going to insert that country ID in my script by inserting it there. And at this point in time, I actually can run this procedure, run the script, and we've inserted one record. And then if I now go and look at my table, I will see at the bottom of my table that an item was added, but number one, it doesn't have a GUID, so that's an indication that it hasn't yet gone to mfiles. And my process ID is 1, which also tells me, this thing hasn't yet been processed. Obviously, if I go into mfiles, it won't be there. What I need to do is I need to run the batch update instruction, execute SPMF update table. I specify my table name and the update method. And if I go and hover over here, you can see that this procedure actually has a whole range of parameters. Many of these parameters are specialists, and which we will deal with in subsequent videos. At this stage, we're basically going to do a very simple execution of this particular procedure by just running the SPMF update table with the table name and the update method 0. Execute that. It runs through and it has updated the record. If I now go back into my table, you'll notice that that record now has a GUID, and that record has been updated in M files. And if I go and let's just get a something that we can search on. So let's put the record in. In fact, because I'm using exactly the same user, I actually have the record there that I've added. And you will see that this is a record that I've just added. So that concludes the demonstration of a very simple insert record and a bit of understanding in terms of all of the specialist columns on every class table.